Hello, Bill.
Good afternoon, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
I know we're out of routine talking in the afternoon. Sometimes like that makes you a little grumpy. Sometimes I'm like interrupting with your Reagan-esque nap time.
Well, there they go again. No, Bill, there is something to that. I wake up optimistic and happy and full of joy. And then throughout the day, you people start to wear me down. And then when we record in the afternoon, my tolerance isn't quite what it is. But I'm having a drink because it's got to be 5 o'clock somewhere. So, Bill, I will be able to endure your talk about debt ceilings and whatever horrific things are in politics this particular week.
Is that a smart water in your cup?
Yeah, it is LaCroix. Do you partake of the sparkling waters?
Matt, I have you seen my apparatus?
Depends on which one you were talking
Here,
about.
here. You vamp for like 10 seconds.
Okay, I'll vamp. That's me vamping. This is great TV. What Bill doesn't know is that not only do you drink sparkling water, oh, I was going to say you mix some gin in, but Bill, you home. It looks like you're home brewing your own
Yes,
soda.
for those of you watching at home, this is my CO2 tank. I don't buy seltzer at the store anymore. Although you do have to get a fresh plastic bottle. So maybe like once a month I'll get a 2 liter bottle of seltzer. But this is this is a 5 pound CO2 tank. And my family has seltzer every day. Uh, this will last me 6 months. This is about a $30 tank of CO2, which will last me 6 months.
So does that make me more like elite than you, or you more elite than me? I'm not sure how that works.
Uh, I'm just better. I mean, if you want to call it
Better
elite,
person, more of a conservationist, I would say.
well, I mean, it's definitely better for the environment to be swapping out CO2 tanks. And I mean, I have to buy some plastic bottles, not plastic bottles every day. Um, I mean, I'll use a plastic bottle, for a week or so before swapping out for a new one.
What's this
Uh,
like logistically? Like, how much work is involved? How do you get the bubbles into, like, would I hold my glass up to you and you would like put that
no, no,
nozzle down there? How does that work?
I'll take a 2 liter bottle. I'll fill it up, 7/8 of the way. And then there's a special cap. Yeah, actually, I do have it here. Hold on one second.
Welcome to Seltzer Talk with Bill and Matt.
So there's a special cap
Okay.
uh, that you screw on top of the plastic bottle. You squeeze out the oxygen. You squeeze out the air. Then you screw the tap on. Screw the cap on, and then this ball lock uh, piece connects here, and then the fizz goes in and doesn't go out.
Do
There
you
you
have to
go.
be certified or OSHA compliant to do this, Bill? Do you grow your own? Do you have like a special heat lamp for this? How does that work?
I mean, there's no. This is what you need right here. There's nothing else that you need. The CO2 will absorb faster if the water is cold. So if you chill the water first, it goes a little bit better. But you don't have to. And also you could use it for making soda or making beer or whatever. But I generally just use it for straight seltzer.
Next thing you're going to tell me I shouldn't have my Christmas trees delivered to my front door in a box.
Well, again, these are things that make me superior to you, Matt. I don't know if they
But,
put me
and
in.
yet I don't, and yet people don't complain about me in the comments. The barking. How about that?
I was very upset because in the pandemic there was a period where there was a literal CO2 shortage and I couldn't get my tanks replaced. I'm back on the swing.
Well, I will say this: if you if you, like me, are concerned about beach seasons coming up, pool seasons coming up, I have to work on the bod. I've lost 10 to 15 pounds. You probably haven't noticed because
Really?
you only see me. But pool season's coming up. I'm trying to look good. The great thing about sparkling water or club soda or whatever you want to call it is that it gives you the sensation that you're drinking a soda or an alcoholic beverage or whatever, but no calories, no sugar, and so it's kind of cheating the system. I'm a fan of that bit.
Well, it fills you up more. You don't drink as much water because the
It's
bubbles
a
are
good
sort
point
of
too.
filling. Sorry,
Do I need to vamp more?
what's that?
Do I need to vamp more?
No, only because the dog is being
Are you
barked.
aware that we started recording this episode?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Do you want to get down to business, Matt?
I guess we should get down to business, and I say that only because on one hand we have a ton of material to cover. On the other hand, I'm not really an expert on any of it, so this will be rank punditry. But where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that the former president and leading Republican candidate Donald Trump was found liable of sexual abuse and had to pay his victim $5 million. That strikes me as very large. I mean, if this was anybody else,
Yeah,
it would be the literal end of their political career. And it is mind-boggling to me. And I know I'm a broken record, we've talked about this on past shows, but if you're a Republican that wants to see Donald Trump, fade to black, like how many moments have to happen for you to let slip by? When the indictment happened over the Stormy Daniels hush money case, I mean, I heard from DeSantis folks, well, you can't expect DeSantis to attack him about that. It's obviously such a phony indictment, such a thin case. They would look ridiculous in the eyes of Republican voters to try to make hay with that. Okay, fine. Literal jury trial, finding him liable for sexual abuse. And we saw the deposition that he gave,
yeah.
which was insane. It's hard to be like,
so for those who didn't see it, a couple things from the deposition really stood out. One was the E. Jean Carroll's attorney was reading to him his comments from the January 6th, not January 6th, from the Access Hollywood, um, incident, and where he talks about grabbing women by their you-know-whats. And then she asked Trump, like, she said something to the effect of like, do you think this is right? And he's like, well, just for millions of years, celebrities have been, if you're a celebrity, they let you get away with it. Yeah, this has been, and then he says something to the effect of like, for worse or better, something like that.
Fortunately or unfortunately.
Fortunately or unfortunately, right. Which is like, okay, give me a scenario where it's good that celebrities have been able to get away with that. And then there was the other example. Trump had famously said that E. Jean Carroll was not he couldn't have done this because she's not his type, which raises the question like, well, might you have raped her if she was your type? But putting that aside, he was looking at like a photo and he thought the photo was him and his ex-wife, Marla Maples, but it was him and E. Jean Carroll, and he confused it, which which sort of leads one to think maybe she was his type. It was amazing.
There's no argument that this is some sort of rogue jury that believes some cockamamie story with no corroboration whatsoever. The story was corroborated. She told people, right when it happened. The defense was not able to debunk that in any way. And then the things that Trump said, he looked like not just a sexual predator, but someone who was even proud of it. Everything about it pointed to liability. And it should be a moment for everyone in the Republican Party with a lick of sense to lock arms and say, enough. Here is the chance to say, this person is unfit for office and unfit to be the face of our party, even if it means some short term. I get the mathematical problem that a whole lot of Republicans like Donald Trump, and therefore you risk losing elections because those folks will stay home.
Yeah.
I get it, but you have to recognize that these people are dead weight to your party. They make it very, very difficult for you to win elections because they are attached to somebody who is vile.
I want to agree. I want to agree with you, and even tell you a story about someone I talked to recently. But first, I do want to push back just a little. Eugene Carroll obviously did not report this to the police. She doesn't know when this happened. I don't even think she knows what year it allegedly happened. And it struck me as weird that, and again, I don't want to use the words incorrectly. This was a civil trial, not a criminal trial, and so I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
So
It's not beyond a reasonable doubt standard.
yeah, so the standard is
It's
different
a
too.
preponderance of evidence standard.
But I don't want to say they found him not guilty or
Right.
guilty because
I've been
it's
saying liable, Matt. I've not been saying
libel
guilty.
and all that, right?
Right.
But they found him liable on things such as defamation and on something like sexual battery or something like that. But they did not find him liable on rape. And my question is, if she's saying that he raped her, doesn't it seem like it should be all or nothing? Like either it happened and he's lying, or it didn't happen and she's lying. Is it possible that she's lying about only part of it? He did some things, but not everything. Like that seems implausible to me. It seems to me like it's all or nothing. Where am I wrong?
My understanding is, and I feel like, I mean, I've just been watching some of the TV commentary. I have not done a deep dive into all the written commentary that's happened. I
want a definitive answer.
I'm not expert on the case law. My sense is I feel they sort of danced around the topic on TV. I think that rape in this case would have to mean penile penetration and not just digital penetration. And the sex abuse would apply to digital. So perhaps, I'm curious to hear if a juror speaks publicly about this, but they might say, we can't prove, what exact penetration occurred here, but we don't need to accept the basics of the story. That was what my rough takeaway was.
Well, if indeed that's the allegation, then certainly his Access Hollywood comments would be very pertinent to.
Well, exactly. And he hardly backed away from it in the deposition.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're trying to defend Trump here, you're pulling at some very, very thin straws.
Well, you know me, Bill. I'm always trying to defend Mr. Trump,
right.
Especially from people like you and your ilk who want to attack him every time he allegedly rapes somebody, every time he keeps documents, you name it, you're coming after him. But Bill, I want to tell you a story about a friend that I spoke to recently, a conservative friend. And I'm going to be careful how I talk about this, but I'm talking to this friend, and I brought up, there was this poll recently, Bill. It seems like a million years ago. I think it was 2 days ago. The Washington Post had this shock poll, and it showed that, among other things, Donald Trump, according to this poll, was beating Joe Biden by like 6 points or something, 6 or 7 points. And then one of the interesting findings, if you sort of extrapolate, is that a majority of Americans think Donald Trump is guilty of one of the things that he's been accused of with these potential indictments. And yet a majority of Americans, or at least a plurality, some of those same people who think he's guilty would also vote for him for president. And that's a weird thing. And it reminded me of in 2016, when I thought Trump couldn't win, I was basing it partly on the fact that huge majority of Americans said that he was unqualified, unfit, and lacked the temperament to be president. And I couldn't imagine people voting for someone for president if they also thought that he was unqualified, unfit, and lacked the temperament. And so I was bringing this up to my friend, and my friend said, well, I think I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people who thinks he's guilty, and I would still support him. And I said, well, but what if he's guilty of rape? What if we're going to find, this was before we knew the verdict. And my friend said, well, that would have been 30 or 40 years ago, right? We all do bad things. We've all done bad things. And I couldn't believe it.
Mhm.
But that's where we are, Bill.
Well,
That
but
you could, if Donald Trump could have been guilty of rape, you could believe, not you, but a lot of people could believe that he's guilty of rape, and they'd still vote for him.
I mean, obviously that's true for a good number of people, but I think we should be careful not to put all of our political analysis based all on that one ABC Washington Post poll, because that is, I mean, I'm looking at the Real Clear Politics database of polls, and they have fewer polls than the 538 one has, but this thing has the biggest ones from the past month. And ABC Washington Post had Trump over Biden by 6 points, and that got a lot of attention over the weekend because it came out in the Sunday paper. But you also have what came out today, Yahoo News poll, Biden up to economist UCov taken at the top of the month, dead heat. Emerson poll late April, Biden up to the Harvard Harris poll, which is not really Harvard University, but I believe that's Mark Penn's operation. That has Trump up 5. And the Wall Street Journal poll from mid-April had Biden up 3. And you net that all together in the Real Clear Politics average, you got essentially a dead heat, Trump up by less than a percentage point. You know, we're still in a dead heat situation. You know, this is not, there's no evidence that Trump is suddenly running away with this thing. That is just one poll that came out of a bunch.
And it was a poll of American adults, not likely voters.
Well, I'm actually looking at the ABC Washington Post. They have an all adults, and they have a separate registered voters cross tab, and the +6 for Trump is out of the registered voters pool, not the all adults pool. But you know, more importantly, I thought I don't want to be a big poll truther, you know, because crosstabs can be weird in all sorts of polls because subsamples are small. But there were weird things in the ABC Washington Post crosstab. It had Biden doing much better with seniors, had him winning with seniors and losing with people under the age of 65, which is the reversal of what you usually see in polling. So I don't think
we say, even your version, though, Bill, it's a dead heat. Like, that, to me, is still too close for comfort. I mean, if you believe that Donald Trump lied about the 2020 election, tried to stop the peaceful transfer of prawer, incited a riot, dare say an insurrection on the Capitol, grabs women by the you-know-whats, allegedly rapes, pillages, all the things we know about Donald Trump, and it's neck and neck. The best case scenario is that it's actually neck and neck. That's a problem, Bill.
Well, I'm not saying, you know, you should be totally sanguine. Now, I made a case in the Washington Monthly last week, so last week, 2 weeks ago, that if you look at the pattern of incumbents running for re-election, they almost always win. Things got to go really bad for the incumbent to lose. So you look at the last 4 who have lost. It's Hoover, Carter, George H.W. Bush, and Trump. You know, Hoover, Great Depression, Jimmy Carter, stagflation. You know, H.W. Bush is the one where it's the least eye-popping calamitous. It's more of like a run-of-the-mill recession. But it was a recession. Unemployment was going up in the first part of 1992. Bushies will tell you, well, it was getting better by the third quarter.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of historic analysis say that that's too late. People don't feel it if the improvement's happening that late in the game. And then Trump, of course, had one was never popular, never was above 50% his entire presidency, and had a colossal pandemic to close out his first term. So Biden right now being in the low to mid 40s, not polling super great against leading Republicans, that's not unusual. That was the case for Clinton against Dole and Obama in 2011. George Bush and John Kerry were close for a lot of the time. So this is not strange.
But again, I would say two things. One, you would assume that Trump, and this is maybe naive, but all the baggage that Trump has, including losing, that it wouldn't be so close, right? So if you thought this was going to be easy, if you thought Trump was going to be easy to beat, and let's root for Trump because he'll be easy, like, don't do that. Not true. The other sort of thing to keep an eye on is, of those names you mentioned, Hoover, Carter, Bush, and Trump, at least two of them had primary competition, right? So Pat Buchanan,
Carter and Bush. I mean, Hoover's the pre-primary era.
Teddy Kennedy runs against Carter.
Yeah.
Pat Buchanan runs against Bush, which
Right.
raises the question, will Joe Biden face a serious primary challenge?
I mean, it's getting pretty late in the game. So, I mean, he has nominal challengers in RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson. We talked about that previous show, so I won't rehash that whole thing.
Polling close to 30%.
Combined. And we have minimal polling to go with on that, mind you. But if you're going to mount a real campaign, you got to get cracking. If Biden was losing to Trump and DeSantis by 6 points in 5 polls in a row, then you might see some more panic sticking. If Biden's losing to Trump by 5 or more points in the next several polls, after this sex abuse verdict, and let's say after the debt limit crisis is past us, either solved favorably or unfavorably, one way or the other. Like, once those data points are baked in, and if Biden was losing by a considerable amount in multiple polls, I think you'd see a lot more panic happening, and maybe it would prompt someone to throw a Hail Mary and jump in. But you really got to, I mean, there's doubtful anybody now who has started putting infrastructure together. So it would be really, really difficult to do. Yeah. And to do it is such an audacious, high-risk thing to do for one's career. You do it, if you don't win, and worse, you hobble Biden and lead to Trump winning, you own that L for the rest of your career. So
yeah, I'm also, and I wrote a piece at the Daily Beast, starts off with Don Rumsfeld's quote, you don't go to war with the army you wish you had. You go to war with the army you have. And it ends with Crosby, Stills, and Nash. If you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. So I think what I'm advising Democrats to do. But look, if it ain't Biden, it's going to be Kamala, who's less popular than Biden. And if it ain't Kamala, you've got bigger problems, because now the Democratic Party's torn asunder because you've deprived Kamala. And I'm not convinced that anyone else will be any better. I mean, would Gretchen Whitmer do better against Trump than Biden? I don't think so.
Well, they're all untested. I mean, you can't know. I mean, everyone else is all hypothetical.
Yeah.
No one's gone through the ringer. No one's had the tires kicked. There's no one who's walking in with a automatic degree of appeal that goes across the Democratic spectrum with race, age, ideology. Yeah. Biden navigated that.
If it's Oprah Winfrey or Michelle Obama, I think those are the Deus Ex.
Well, even them, I mean, if either one came in, there'd be a massive amount of fanfare. But you actually don't know how they would actually perform once the tough questions came in. That's all fantasy talk. So right now, Biden's numbers are quite normal. I forgot to mention Reagan. Reagan also was in a touchy place late 82, early 83.
Yeah.
It's not unusual for the incumbent to be in a low point in early to mid year three. So that is purely, why does polling matter? Well, it matters because of this. You have to know the historical context of polls. You have to know the normal trajectory of presidential approval, so you don't embark in unnecessary panic and then take a flyer on somebody who might not be ready for prime time.
All right, we're agreed on that. Uh, as you say, Bill, better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. I wouldn't call Biden the devil, but you did. So,
now,
so
debt limit is going to be interesting. One thing that's happened with past presidents is something happens to uh, remind people that they like the incumbent better than the alternative. So with Clinton, he has the knockdown drag out with Newt Gingrich over government shutdown and debt limit in to come up with a budget agreement, and Clinton wins that showdown hands down. His numbers go up. Reagan had the Grenada invasion, or Grenada, I should say. His numbers were lagging until that was executed well, and his numbers popped back up. I remember I think Obama had more of a slow build. He had a spike when Osama bin Laden was killed, but that faded with the debt limit showdown with Boehner in the summer of 2011. And I think it was very gradual rehabilitation, helped with having Romney as the foil, that Obama was very deft in filleting over the course of the summer and fall of 2012. I don't know if Biden averting default would be that shot in the arm he needs. When you're averting disaster, it's not quite the same as a clear benefit. So I wouldn't necessarily assume
yeah.
it.
Well, the other problem, though, is you've got a potential debt crisis mounting. I'm sorry, we'll get to the debt later. Put a the debt ceiling. We'll talk about that later. You've got a border crisis, right?
Yeah.
With this Title 42 expiring or being repealed. You've got economists talking about a recession at some point. And then, Bill, we've got the Hunter Biden story that won't go away. I don't know. Reflexively, I tend to distrust Jim Jordan and what's his name, Comer, these House Republicans in their investigations. But we can't just reflexively dismiss. They say that they have evidence that that would lead to the conclusion that multiple members of the Biden family have set up these different shell corporations and funneled foreign money into their personal pockets, enriched themselves personally, while Joe Biden was the vice president. Now, again, I'm perfectly willing to believe that these Republicans are full of it. They've given me no reason to trust them. On the other hand, I know for a fact, and it's in my book, forthcoming book, pre-order now, Filthy Rich Politicians, that obviously the Biden family has traded off of Joe Biden's name to profit personally, and not even necessarily in ways that were illegal, but definitely in ways that I would say are unethical. So it's a long way of saying Biden is barely competing with Trump at this point, right? And what if the border goes bad? What if the debt ceiling goes bad? What if Hunter Biden is indicted? And what if Biden is implicated to some degree as vice president? I mean, there's a lot of stuff hanging out there right now that, I feel like with Trump, again, if he's accused of rape, people are like, what else is new? That's just Trump being Trump. I'm not sure it's the case with Biden. Like, bad news could hurt Biden way more than bad news might hurt Trump.
Well, it's going on history. The economy's got to really go south for an incumbent to lose, typically speaking. which again is not a completely implausible scenario, but we haven't had it as of yet. The numbers of the GDP numbers were slowing, but not full blown recession. Unemployment numbers are great. Wages are solid. There's been a growth in real disposable income over the past few months as inflation has slowed. So there's a lot of good indicators. And even if you had some quarters of negative growth this year, if you rebound by early 2024, historically speaking, Biden would be in good shape. Reagan had a tough recession in '82. Obama had some negative growth, midway through as well. But you want that trajectory going your way in really the first 2 quarters of the election year. Those are the critical quarters. So I would, if second quarter GDP was negative, I don't think you say, "Oh my God, Biden's a goner." That's not the critical quarter. And keep in mind, the thing that's really been bogging Biden down, arguably the biggest thing that has hurt his job approval, is inflation. If we have we have 1 quarter of slow growth, if we have a quarter or 2 of negative growth because the Fed has come in hard on interest rates, but it successfully reduces inflation, and then the Fed eases and the growth comes back and inflation stays contained, well, then you got all firing all cylinders just in time for election day. I'm not making predictions here. There's a lot of ifs there, but you just can't take the one negative quarter and say, "Oh my God, everything's going to fall apart by next year." Now, this to me is great incentive for Biden to not default on the debt in a month's time when the economy is in a sensitive place. And moreover, and I got a piece about this coming out in the monthly tomorrow. There's a lot of talk on the Democratic side. Don't make the mistake Obama did. Don't get rolled like Obama did in 2011. He negotiates with Boehner over the debt limit, and he's boxed into these horrible spending cuts when the recovery was still weak, and it made the recovery slow, and it dragged his popularity down. That's why you don't negotiate with the gun to your head, because the Republicans, they're trying to sabotage the economy and trying to sabotage re-election effort. And Obama himself in his memoir says, I want to do long-term deficit reduction, but aggregate demand was weak at that point. Unemployment was high. It wasn't the right time to cut. You wanted to push that off to down the road. You would have rather spent more in that moment in time, but felt he couldn't after the Tea Party election of 2010 and Republicans having the House. That's not the economic conditions today. Unemployment is super low. It is record low, but inflation is high. Aggregate demand is not the problem right now. So I'm not saying Biden can cut, an infinite amount and not get him in trouble. You obviously can cut too much, just like the Fed can raise rates too much. But there is some level of cuts which wouldn't hurt and might even help a little bit in the short run to help to complement what the Fed is doing and get inflation down. I mean, I'm not macroeconomist. I can't tell you what the perfect number is. And I'm not saying that the cut should go wherever. So some cuts will be more sensitive than others, but that's what negotiations are all about. So I think Biden has an incentive. Biden's value, the reason why Biden won, is that Trump's crazy. I'm a level-headed hand on the tiller. I'm old school. I'm wise. I'm experienced. I'm not going to drive us off the cliff. So it doesn't fit the brand to go off the cliff with a debt default and say, "Well, it's not my fault. It's those guys' fault." Like that's not what we hired you to do. We hired you to keep everybody. You said you're going to be Mr. Bipartisan. Now is your time to shine. And so guess what happened yesterday? They meet. McCarthy, McConnell, Biden meet. They say the staff should negotiate. They say they should meet again in 3 days. Biden does a press conference where he says, a clawback on COVID funds, yeah, that can be on the table. He's negotiating. He said, "I'm not going to negotiate with a gun to my head. I'm not going to negotiate if they're not going to guarantee a clean debt limit hike. Well, McCarthy didn't do that, and they're negotiating because Biden knows that there's a deal to be had. It doesn't have to be devastating. They have to cut a deal by September anyway, because that's when they have to prove money to keep the government open. And McCarthy isn't doing what Boehner did or what Ted Cruz did or what Newt Gingrich did. He has never said, this proposal of mine, take it or leave it, or the economy is a goner. He has not said that. He's passed a bill, said, this is my offer, let's negotiate, which is, I mean, it's a fine distinction because, yeah, the debt limit thing's still hanging out there, but it's not being presented as do it my way or the economy gets it. And so it's harder for Biden to say, these guys are being unreasonable, I'm going to stand my ground. You, the American public, will be with me because you can see how unreasonable they're being. You know, but McCarthy is just too boring a person to engender that kind of ill will. He's not, he's not having a tantrum on Air Force One like Gingrich did.
Maybe that's his secret weapon.
It's a good card to play. I mean, he's not reading Green Eggs and Ham on the floor of the Senate.
I will say this: Kevin McCarthy looks friendly a lot. He has like a smiley sort of demeanor a lot. They haven't been able to demonize him.
No, I mean, Biden demonizes MAGA Republicans. Trump, Major Taylor Greene, they'll say McCarthy is beholden to them. He had to make all these concessions to get the gavel. What they leave out is, and he's ignored all of that in the proposal they just put on the table, and the MAGA types let him do it. So it's much harder to make the connection. It's always harder to say, well, this guy might seem okay, but the people behind him, they're the ones you got to worry about. That's always a harder play than when the awful person is the guy, front and center. So on one hand, I think McCarthy has played his cards very well and gotten Biden to the table. The flip side of that is he doesn't have a strong hand in terms of what he actually wants to get out of this. He has no great demand that he can say, you got to do this, or there's no way this gets through the House. It's all very, it's all jello what he's got on the table here. So I think the hope for Biden should be find something that's not too bad, not too severe. But you can say McCarthy can go back and say, hey, I got some cuts. I got something. We got something out of this. And the Freedom Caucus guys may not like it, but I feel comfortable. Kevin McCarthy feel comfortable putting this on the table without worrying I'm going to lose the gavel because they're going to pull the motion to vacate on me. And that's where they want to get.
All right. I want to go back to circle back to our last conversation.
Yeah.
5 minutes ago. The polling.
Yeah.
And I just want to, because I want to underscore how things have escalated. Okay. So like 2 months ago, I think the sense was, Ron DeSantis could very well be the nominee. At the very least, Trump is going to have to make his way through the Republican primary. It's not going to be handed to him. And then he'd have to face Joe Biden, and Biden will probably beat him. That was the sense then. Today, I think the sense is Trump easily wins the Republican nomination. And it's a jump ball whether he beats Biden. And so the bottom line is now it's a jump ball as to like it's 50-50 that Donald Trump ends up back in the White House, which I think is kind of the conventional wisdom today. But I think the fact that we're there is actually astonishing, and no one is pointing out how quickly we went from, once again, he probably can't do it, to, oh yeah, it's 50-50.
I would certainly be happy with the state of things if Trump was clearly on the short end of most polling. But
am I wrong about that analysis?
That we should be worried that Trump's doing as well as he is?
Well, not just that, but that even a couple months ago, it looked like he was going to have to, run the gauntlet kind of to get back. It's like, well, the Republicans will stop him. Ron DeSantis might beat him, but then Biden will crush him. And now it's like, he's going to easily win the Republican nomination, and it's a jump ball as to whether Biden could beat him or not.
I mean, I would still think what we've seen in the last 3 election cycles, Trump is still not a strong bet to win a general election. I think, and you can't judge Biden's prospects based on year 3 of job approval data. The big unknown is the economy. If the economy went south next year, then time to panic. But there are enough positive signals that I think I expect there to be a debt default deal, a debt limit deal. I expect Biden to run a good victory lap on that, and I'm hopeful that we're heading to a soft landing here, inflation wise and GDP wise. But that's the part that we don't know about. But keep in mind, the economy was not so hot, the inflation was not so hot in November 2022. And Biden had one of the best midterms for an incumbent party, in history, which suggests that election denial and other insanities can outweigh a certain amount of discomfort with the economic, indicators.
I mean, since you brought up the economy, I mean, that Washington Post ABC News poll showed that was something like 54% of Americans liked the Trump economy better than the Biden economy. I mean, I think
I wouldn't overstate that one poll, because that was definitely a very Trump-friendly poll. It wasn't the average, thermostatic gauge of where the country's at. But Biden's job approval in the economy is bad. I mean, they're consistently bad in any poll. And that's because of inflation. That's the only thing you can point to is inflation.
Well, that's a big thing, though.
The upside is that inflation has been easing, and the Fed is currently embarking on a project to bring that down, and it seems to be working. So that's we can't know exactly where it's going to be a year from now, but the trajectory is in the right direction.
All right, so we're almost out of time. What do you want to end on, Bill? Anything to plug? Any final thoughts?
Well, I do think we should talk Hunter a little bit more. Now that I think I excited you put him out there. One, I think your point about we can't trust the James Comer crowd just because they have a revelation, is absolutely correct. Like, these people have not earned the benefit of the doubt. They don't get to put out a new document and warrant flood the zone media coverage. Shoot first, ask questions later media coverage.
Yeah, I think that's right.
You need to vet what they put out. You should.
I totally agree. I'm skeptical of anything they do, but I would also say that the Hunter Biden laptop story initially is a classic example. So I think we were all skeptical of that, and I think rightly so. I mean, there were former Intel.
But what is the story? I mean, even knowing that the laptop's a real laptop, what is the story that actually implicates Joe Biden into doing something unethical or illegal? Hunter might have done stuff that's unethical or illegal. That's not the same as Joe doing something that's unethical. Even what
there was the one email talking about the big guy getting a cut and that kind of thing. But you're right, there was nothing. But my point is, even sort of conceding that point to you, Bill, the idea was that the laptop itself was bogus, that the whole story was BS, and it turned out not to be. And I think the same thing happened with COVID. Donald Trump floods the zone, as Steve Bannon said, and lies all the time and says a million crazy things, and then once in a while he's right about something. And if we have this default assumption that they're always lying, they're always wrong, stop clock is right twice a day. Every once in a while they're going to be right, and we're going to look wrong and biased. And that will further erode, I think, trust of journalism. I'm not even a straight reporter. I'm an opinion journalist, but I still want to preserve that credibility.
There's right and there's right. I mean, the media did investigate the laptop. Washington Post did 100 laptop stories. They didn't go bonkers in October of 2020 when they didn't have access to everything. And they didn't immediately adopt the narratives that the people who had the laptop were putting out to suggest this automatically means that Joe Biden himself is implicated in something scandalous.
But didn't, social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, didn't they throttle stories about the laptop? And, another example would be the lab leak theory with Tom Cotton, right? I mean, that was labeled as misinformation or something. And it turns out, most likely, it's not proven, but it probably was a lab leak, or at least it's certainly a plausible theory.
It's. I mean, there's evidence either ways. It's still not a settled matter. I mean, to your
You
point,
get my
yeah,
point, though.
I think it's a fair point that we shouldn't be just squelching stories out of the gate when we don't have all the facts. But by the same token, we don't have to go hair on fire,
We should.
spread, think the worst when you don't have all the facts.
We should. The good news is that it is, as you noted, it's only May of 2023. And so, Comer, they're saying that there are these documents showing bank transfers that would presumably corroborate the notion that the Biden crime family has set up these shell corporations to funnel money. And
Well, there isn't even. I mean, just what I
but
read,
my point is, like,
it isn't even necessarily
at
a
some
crime.
point,
It's not even necessarily a crime that they took money.
well, but if Joe Biden's the vice president and they're taking money from Russia or I don't even know what were China. I think China was one of the countries. Then that certainly is, I would say, newsworthy. I think it's scandalous. The question would then be, did Joe Biden knowingly alter any of his policies or foreign aid or things like that?
If you have evidence of
don't know.
that, fine. But you're starting the speculation game. This is what a lot of the Biden haters want. They want you to start speculating about it when you don't have evidence to that effect. You don't even have a shred of evidence. You just have these little granules of what family members did. But we start talking in terms of Biden crime family. It sounds like we have evidence that. I know you're being a little facetious there,
Well,
but people do that.
That's what we do. It's like the Harry T. Stone, Judge Harry Stone. They said, "Judge not lest you be judged," and he said, "That sort of puts a cramp in the old job description here." I mean, we are commentators. We are, dare say, pundits. We talk about things that are emerging, and if there is, Republicans need. There's going to be an investigation, ostensibly, and that will either demonstrate that there was something unethical or illegal, or it will not.
But I don't think what bad actors do. Bad actors inject incomplete information into the bloodstream so people can legitimately speculate on what it might mean and make you believe things are probably true when you don't have any actual evidence to that point.
I would have speculated a week ago as to whether Donald Trump might be found to be liable in the defamation case. Does that make me?
It actually went to trial. I mean, you and I were not talking endlessly about the Jean Carroll situation until she proved enough of her case to get it to trial.
If the election were held, if the election were held next week, I would say you have a point. And indeed, I would say that's part of the reason everyone was very skeptical of the Hunter laptop story to begin with. It seemed like an October surprise.
Well, exactly. We know bad actors do these things in October, so you can't fully vet it in time, but you can speculate, and maybe the speculation will be good enough to serve your political ends. And this is why I'm not as angry at Twitter or Facebook for slow. I mean, they didn't say you're not allowed to post it, but definitely slowed the spread of it because there was a hesitation. Are we being gamed here? Is someone trying to game this before the election? Maybe we should slow the roll on this. I mean, I'm not saying it's not open to criticism, and maybe you say it was the wrong call, but the impetus of doing that is understandable considering, one, the stuff that Russia did do 4 years prior and the timing of it.
Speculation is part of our job description. We speculate, we do analysis. That's part of what we do. And again, if the election were next week, I would be more open to the notion that even talking about this, having been sprung on us in the 11th hour, that talking about it could actually influence things. But as for now, Comer is he holds a serious position, and they had a press conference today. I think it's newsworthy.
Well, if a House member makes an allegation, it's newsworthy, but you
Yeah.
do good reporting yourself. You don't just like transcribe the news conference and call that news. You vet
Yeah.
what is being given to you by a politician.
I agree. My point is, as an opinion columnist and a commentator, my point is this. I think the news media um, should not make the mistake again of dismissing these charges because they're coming from people we don't like and we don't trust. And I think there's good reason that, generally speaking, we do not like these people and we do not trust these people. I also think they could be right. And if we reflexively dismiss them, ignore them based on their lack of credibility and past performance, we set ourselves up to lose credibility. Um, and so that's my kind of take on it. To the extent I have a take, that's it.
Last, I guess, two quick things, I guess, because I do need to jump. I'm sure you need to jump. But do you have a quick thought about the George Santos indictment, and you have a quick thought about CNN doing the Trump town hall tonight?
Yeah. So my take on Santos is that this is what happens when we don't have local media, like strong local reporting. There was one newspaper who actually did have him dead to rights, but they didn't get any other pickup. When we back in the day when we had strong local press coverage, reporters, and their reporting meant something, he wouldn't have gotten elected. So that's my take on that. I'll be watching with interest my former colleague, Caitlin Collins, whom I worked with for many years at the Daily Caller, and then CNN will be hosting, moderating, I guess, the town hall. So for me, that's what I'll be watching. I'm going to be rooting for her and watching to see how she does.
Uh, do you think there's any chance that Republicans will start turning on Trump after this town hall?
There's always a chance, but it is a 1% chance.
So you're saying there's a chance.
That's right.
What do you got to plug?
So I, read my stuff at the Daily Beast, of course. Pre-order my book, Filthy Rich Politicians. I did a really cool podcast with Ryan Bussey, who's a former firearms executive who wrote a great memoir called Gunfight, which I highly recommend. And he and I had a very long, very wide-ranging discussion about the book, about really he's from Montana, from a ranch in Montana. I'm from a gun culture. He's from a gun culture, and we really talked about and lamented how, like, when we grew up, our dads being hunters, how that gun culture has changed and metastasized in the last several decades. So I think people will enjoy it. I'd really recommend giving it a listen at Matt Lewis in the News.
Very exciting. So I got a piece coming on the monthly tomorrow about the debt limit and Biden's shift. I mentioned this on a past show, but we're coming up. So this is the 100th anniversary of the Calvin Coolidge taking the oath of office.
I thought you were going to say it's the 100th anniversary of our DMZ. It's been a few years.
Our first DMZ was by the kerosene lamp at the Coolidge Homestead in Plymouth Notch, Vermont. So as I am the vice president of the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Library and Museum Standing Committee, I will be moderating a panel discussion June 7th, so less than a month away. The title of which is When the President Dies, How Calvin Coolidge and Others Guided America Through Mourning. I got a panel of 3 historians that I'll be talking to. And if you go to the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Library and Museum Facebook page, you will see an event page there. And this will be on Zoom, and you can register to get the Zoom link from that events page. So that's going to be in the evening, 7 p.m. Eastern on June 7th. So sign up for that.
I love it. You right wingers pushing your Calvin Coolidge. I love it. Keep up the good work. Check that out. All right. We'll see you back here in the DMZ next week.
All right. Take care.
Have a good one.